welcome. My name is Nick Best, and I'm going to be talking you through the strategic analysis of Glory Soccer Club. This is the August 2015 strategic case study for the CIMA-based exam, and this video then is going to be guiding you through the E3 models. Things like Pestel analysis and Porter's 5 forces and Swot analysis, Ansof's matrix, critical success factors, the Mendelow's matrix for stakeholders. I'm going to be having a look at mission and objectives and really trying to bring together all of those key models. I will remind you of the model briefly, but I'm not going to try and reteach it. Just a quick reminder before then explaining my analysis of that, with a view that if you get those models come up in the exam, or if you have to use them, then you will be able to do so, bringing together my knowledge in combination with your own. Now, just so you know, there'll be a number of you working through my video series, and this will be, I think it's video 8 of my analysis of this case study, and you'll know all about me. There's one or two of you just watching this for the first time. I have been working on case studies now for 9 years. I've done these videos for about 4 years. I've worked through, what must it be, 30 or 40 different cases. So I do know the final level case study like the back of my hand. And my goal is to share that with you, share my knowledge of having taught that final level case study for Kaplan, BPP, First Intuition, and for a number of years now here at Astranti. And so I want to share that experience and bring that together, bring my knowledge also of business strategy together to support you to understand what it takes to pass this exam, particularly in relation to the strategic analysis. And what we're going to do, where we're going to end up, is a full analysis of this scenario with my view on where to take this business. If I was a director, how would I take this business forward? And what I also want to do is then explain to you how you use that in the exam. Because you won't be asked in the exam, do a full strategic analysis. It'll be a small part of it. So how do you use all this analysis? That's another key focus for me in this video. Okay? So, look, this video then, this industry, it's the football industry, of which I'm sure many of you know that now. So I won't go through this particular slide. It's a nice industry for some, a horrible industry for people that hate football, is the long and short of this. But if you do hate football, look, it's just another business. Understand it from a business perspective, and you will be able to analyse the case and do as well as really anyone else. It's the business of football that's key, not the fact you know the latest results of Barcelona or Manchester United or whoever your favourite club is. Mine happens to be Brighton and Hove Albion, for anyone that's interested, and I don't suppose you are, having seen that I'm a Brighton fan, but there we go. In fact, I expect some of you are turning off the video right now, hearing that. Okay, anyway, that's the way football is, of course. And actually, one of the passions of football, one of the interesting points of football, is people really are passionate about their clubs and passionate in hating other clubs. Okay, Brighton fans seem to have this love-hate, well, very much hate relationship with Crystal Palace fans. You know, they're reasonably close together, but not that close together. But it was something that was built in the 60s and 70s. And actually, there are issues in this case. We have got Glory Soccer Club with a big, heavy competition against Walleen, their local rivals. Okay, probably a similar distance between Brighton and Crystal Palace, actually. You know, passions come into football, and probably more than the business generally. It's not just about profits, because it's about fans, and it's about passion, it's about winning. And we've got to bring all that into bear in addition to our overall analysis. Okay, so the overall approach that I'm going to be taking then is based on the rational model. And, oh, excuse me there. Just flip down. Here's the rational model as it is in front of you. So, in the rational model, you start off by working out where you want to be in the future. We probably want to be winning the league, and we want to be, hey, how are we going to do that with clear objectives? Well, it's going to be a good youth system, and so on and so on. I'll cover the details as we go through. With what approach to ethics and governance, and taking into account what stakeholders, you can see, therefore, that we then know where we're going to be taking the business in the future through that analysis. But when you're developing a strategy, it's a bit like going on a journey somewhere. You need to know where your destination is, but you also need to know where you are right now. And this is where we look at our current position. We will produce a SWOT analysis, look at our strengths and weaknesses, our opportunities and our threats. And we would do that by analysing the business environment, looking at models such as the 5 forces, pest analysis, looking at the different products that we've got. Well, there's not many in this case. It's mostly football and a bit of merchandising. Okay, and basically other analysis of our own internal strengths and weaknesses to understand where the business is now. So you know where we are. We know where we are at the moment. We know where we're going in the future. If we were at our GPS, imagine this like a GPS system. The GPS picks up our current position, which is like our SWOT, and then we have to type into it where we're going, so it now knows where to go. Then it can plot the route. And if this is the case now we can plot the route. Now we can decide on our business strategy. We can decide on what our generic strategy is. Remember, cost, leadership, differentiation. We can use Ansof's matrix to look at various different strategies to take us forward and decide which of those. Remember, Ansof is products and markets, new and existing. Then we can look at methods of growth like joint development and internal development and having alliances and so on. Okay, to define the way forward for the business. And that's where I want to end up in this video, is to define that way forward. So let's get straight on then by looking at the future of the business. And as we look at the future, we need to start off with the mission statement. Now, the mission statement of an organization is telling us about what that organization is, why we are in business, who do we exist for, and what are we doing for those people. And Campbell set out 4 overriding elements of a mission statement. Why do we exist and who do we exist for? That's the purpose. Then we've got the strategy, is how will we compete? How will we be successful? What are we going to do to achieve that purpose? And the possible businesses that we might be in. Then we've got the values. What do we stand for? Things like integrity and fairness and good ethical standards. Okay, good quality in all we do. And then the policies that we put in place for staff to follow to keep them focused on how we're going to achieve that. To be fair, actually, although in Campbell's model you have policies, you don't see that so often in many real-life mission statements. It tends to be the top 3. So that gives us a direction. What we need to do then is look at Glory and decide what is their mission? Where is the goal? Where are we trying to take this business? Okay. So their overall mission then is their primary objective, which is to be a world-class soccer club. And, as a mission overall, that's very, very broad. It's very much a kind of overriding purpose, but it's extremely generic, hard to know exactly what is world-class. What that does do, though, is it's about soccer. So let's say there was an opportunity to move into cricket. Now, in Vardoon, the country in which they're operating, cricket is the big national sport. And Glory is not about cricket. It's not about other sports. Now, those are possible opportunities, but we'd really be changing our mission statement. So it keeps us focused. Look, soccer is where the business is going. That's one of the reasons for a mission. So at least it does that, even if it's lacking in some other ways. What we need to do is combine that mission with some of the elements in the business model in order to understand things like the strategy and the approach, some of the elements that were given to us in Campbell's 4 elements. Okay, so it gives us the business model, and the goal, of course, is to win soccer matches, but they specifically say how. We're going to recruit excellent players. We're going to have good training techniques. We're going to have good management. We're going to be financially prudent and responsible. Now, this is really important, okay, because there is a conflict between winning soccer matches and spending lots of money on players and spending lots of money on the best manager going, and being financially prudent. In fact, we see this in our financial analysis. In my video on financial analysis on F3, I was talking there about the fact that we've just gone into a loss-making situation, and that's mostly because of the purchase of new players and the amortization coming through, and the increased salaries as a result of that. This is a very, very difficult balance. Now, our role is as a financial manager reporting to the board, and we'll be expected to give that financially prudent approach. Not the fans approach, but the financially prudent approach, okay? Carter, the chairman, and the CEO, Martin, they may go on and ignore us. But in your exam, that's the approach that you need to be putting forward. And in the exam, you can justify your financially prudent approach by coming back and saying, and this is consistent with the business model, and therefore I think that a particular strategy, perhaps it's the purchase of Philip Novak, okay, which is a highly likely issue. One or two of the variants will definitely have that as an issue in it, no doubt about it. It's suggesting to me in the case study that he's looking like he might be a bit expensive. Okay, look, there's no pricing in there, but he's just such a big name, he might be a bit expensive. And you might conclude, probably a bit too expensive, we don't want to make ourselves loss-making, and therefore the financially prudent approach is consistent with our business model, which is to win soccer matches whilst being financially imprudent. Having him might help us win, but it wouldn't be financially imprudent. It's not therefore consistent with our mission and our business model. Okay, look, having Philip would help support the Glory brand. Okay, which is another argument. So can you see how you can start to see issues that come up in the exam, and you can start to relate them back to this mission? And that's one of the big frustrations of the examiner. Okay, in the recent post-exam guides, the examiner said, look, some people, it just didn't even look like they really knew the pre-scene, or they'd even read through the pre-scene. They weren't using that pre-scene. And a big tip for you is to lead all your arguments back to the mission and the business model. We can just take Philip Novak here again. You know, would he support a soccer environment which was exciting with good competition and unfair? Not really. It's not really about the soccer environment, Philip Novak. But the first three are, and you can lead your arguments back to these to decide whether to go ahead with the purchase of Philip or whatever the scenario is that's in your variant of the exam. Okay. So if we were to compare that then, in terms of how good is that, there is a purpose, you know, leading soccer club. Doesn't really say for who we exist. You could probably assume it's a mixture of the fans and the shareholders. Okay, it does give us a how we'll compete though, and it does give us some of the values in terms of fair competition. So certainly some of those top three, and as I said, policies isn't often in them real world statements anyway, so I'm not too worried by that one. Okay, so do remember to refer back to the business model during the exam to justify going ahead with certain decisions. Very, very important. Okay, so next we go on to objectives and performance measurements. Now, of course, the theory goes that mission statements are very high level. They're very broad. You know, just a quick look up here again. You know, we've got things like being financially prudent. But the question is what do we mean by financially prudent? Is that always being in a profit-making situation? Is that always ensuring that we've got a certain gearing ratio on our balance sheet? Okay, is that making sure that we've got so much cash available to us? Okay, winning soccer matches, does that mean winning the league? Okay, or winning the cup, or coming in the top 3 each year? You know, what is our very, very specific goal and target? We don't have specific targets in the pre-scene, but what we do have are a list of measures of performance, and you can see them there. Get match results and get match attendances up and retention of current players and so on. Okay, and what I want to do is relate this to a particular model, and that particular model is the Balanced Scorecard. Now, why do I want to do this? It's just that this is the key performance measurement model that comes up in the E3 exams. A little bit of it in P3 as well, and actually you should have seen it throughout earlier studies too. And the Balanced Scorecard model says that we should be measuring performance not just financially. When Kaplan and Norton developed this model, the model said, what they said was that too many people were just looking at financial measures. And look, indeed, we do have financial measures here that they are using, such as profit and cash generation. And another financial measure is to look at revenues and to look at wages and costs, another financial measure. Okay, actually, we've got share price in here as well. But what they said is that Too many businesses just look at finances, which is too short term, often annually focused. Not enough we're looking longer term about internal efficiencies, about customers, about learning and innovation. And they came up with those 4 headings: customers, internal, financial, learning and innovation. And so what we can see is that, look, they've got a nice range of measures here, because actually they have got some customer focused measures, such as measuring attendances, and probably what's most important to customers are match results in the league position. Arguably that top one is also the internal perspective. That's about how well you are doing and running your business. And so that's also telling you about, for instance, things like how good the training programs are, how good injury prevention will be, although it might be nice to have some quite specific measures on those as well. And we've also got the internal measure of retention of players and recruitment of new ones. That's how good is our recruitment program and our team spirit, and the way that, in terms of keeping players happy, how good are we in terms of that? So that's very much an internal perspective. What you'll notice from a balanced scorecard point of view is that the learning and innovation measures are missing. And so we might have some measures such as amount spent on training, number of new ideas implemented, as ways of expanding to get all 4 criteria met. Overall then, they've got some good measures of performance, nice broad measures, perhaps bringing some learning and innovation as well, perhaps some more specific ones, for instance, things like number of players getting injured, the potential now to use some data on player statistics. That's one of the issues that was raised in the pre-scene. That could be brought into this too. So there's opportunity for new things too. But look, some good performance measures. Next is governance. And governance in this business, well, what we often do in the CIMA exams is relate it back to the UK's Code of Corporate Governance. Now, of course, Glory are not based in the UK. They don't have to abide by this. We just use this, therefore, as a set of good principles of governance. Things like separate chairman, CEO, independent non-executive directors, having audit, nomination and remuneration committees, a focus on risk and risk management, and so on. Okay? And what we need to do is apply that then to the case study in order to guide our decision in terms of how good their governance is. Now, a good thing is that Glory do have a non-executive chairman and 4 non-executive directors, and there are as many of them as there are executives. That means that you've got these independent non-execs to look after the shareholders' needs, to give advice and guidance, and to sit on the remuneration committee, the nomination committee, and the audit committee, in order to ensure those roles of fair pay, fair appointment of directors, and financial statements analysis and risk management, which is the audit committee, those are well looked after, and we've got those non-execs to bring that independence. But one big concern for me is that we've got this CEO, Martin, and a non-executive chairman, Carter. Now, my concern is with Carter. Carter founded the club. He's a 35% shareholder. He's very rich, likely to be putting funds in the future. Look, we want Carter. We like Carter. If I was a supporter, I would love to have Carter. I really would. And I'd be desperately hoping he was going to put more money into the club to buy me lots of nice new players. But from a purely exam point of view, he may have too much power. He's the non-executive chairman, but I suspect, look, it's not particularly clear in the pre-scene, but I suspect what Carter says goes, possibly even above what Martin is saying. And that is not the way it should be on a board of directors. The CEO should be running the business day to day, the non-executive chairman running the board meetings and overseeing those meetings and having meetings with shareholders and managing the non-execs. And my guess is that Carter is exercising far too much power. Now, look out for that as a possible issue in the exam. And if you see that, you know the examiner's going down the line of governance, too much power to one person. And look, yeah, that might be quite good for the club in some ways, but from a pure theory governance perspective, that's not so good. Look, the one positive thing here is that as a 35% shareholder, his interests are aligned with the other shareholders, and this limits the agency problem. Do you remember the theory of agency? The agency is the fact you've got directors running the business, shareholders owning it, and they're different people. You've got the directors as the agent of the shareholders, and the directors might not run the business in the best interest of the shareholders. Well, look, there shouldn't be too much of a problem with power to the chairman here. Also, we've got another non-exec that represents the fans, and the fans are major parts of other shareholders. So we have got some quite good representation on the board for the fans, to be fair. It's good that ethics and CSR are important throughout the pre-scene. It talks about them, and we'll talk about that a little bit more shortly. That's good governance, is to have good ethics. Okay, we've got a good board of directors who are experienced and knowledgeable. We might like some with a bit more soccer experience, but the reality is that, look, soccer's only been around in Valdoon for the last 9 years. It's going to be extremely hard to find people who have got soccer experience for many years unless we bring them in for overseas. And we do want people that know the local culture as well. So I think actually the board of directors is reasonably balanced. So there are some weaknesses in the business's structure, and we'll cover those now. So for instance, we've got the director of soccer, who is Victor, and the team manager Simon, who works directly for him. And Simon is directly in charge of things like training and things like recruitment of players. And I suspect that Simon wants a lot of control over that, but I also suspect Victor does as well. So there's potential for conflict there. I'm also slightly concerned that Sate, the marketing director, is in charge of stadium operations. He might do a very good job, but I'd normally expect to see maybe a separate director fully in charge of the stadium and running the stadium, not really the marketing director. Is he qualified to do that? Is he the right person? He may be perfectly fine, but you might just want to look out for that. If I was asked to change structure, then those are the two areas that I would do. To be honest with you, I think besides that, the structure is pretty good, really. It covers all the key areas of the business. So looking at governance overall, look, there are some things we don't know very much about. Things like how they do on their financial reporting. We don't know much about the information for directors in terms of directors being given information prior to board meetings and being involved in board meetings. We don't know how they use the AGM. Or we don't know about regular meetings with institutional shareholders. They probably don't have many institutional shareholders, to be fair, but fans might be who we might meet with. Overall, then, my feeling on governance, okay, one major issue, which is the issue of too much control to Carter. Besides that, it looks reasonably fair and good. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you're watching the free sample, and that's where this case study finishes. On the full video, I go on for over an hour and a half, where I explain Porter's 5 forces and how that applies here, pastel analysis. I look at Ansof's matrix. I give you my strategy, explain how to use that strategy in the case study. And my hope actually is that through having watched this, and hopefully you've also seen my first video, okay, which is available, the whole of that video is available for free, that you'll think that the whole of this video series is worth buying. Of course, if you're just doing this yourself, you can do the whole thing yourself as well. You can go through applying all of those models as you go through the case. So as a minimum, I hope you'll go through doing that, but I also hope that you found my analysis useful and that you'll think about them, therefore buying that. Of course, you can always buy our course. The whole of this video series is available on the course. Plus, you can buy you'll get the masterclasses. If you've missed the first masterclass, you can still see the recordings of that one. So you'll get my analysis there. You'll get my course videos that explain what it takes to pass a strategic case study. You'll get 5 mocks, of which 4 of those you'll get marked, and so therefore you get really good feedback on that. And that's really, to me, that's what's most important in terms of passing this exam. It's not all this strategic analysis, which is incredibly important. It's practicing and getting feedback so you know where you're going wrong. People tell me the reason they fail is time management, and when we get people passing, it was the feedback was so good. That's why I passed. That's what I often hear, actually. I do sometimes get people say the video was great. Just had one of those today, which was lovely. Someone that passed yesterday. I'm recording this after the day after results day. Okay, someone passed yesterday. Yeah, the video was perfect. That's what got me through. Great. I'm glad that this video was useful. But you know what it is more than anything else? It's the feedback. That's what we get. Okay, mocks with feedback, and you get all of that on the course. So I hope you think the course will be worth coming on as well. But if not, you can buy all of those as individual items. Visit astranti.com and you can see any of those on the SCS case study pages. And I'll leave you there with just the wish of best luck in your studies. Work hard up to the exam, and good luck going forward with that exam, and I hope it goes well on the day.